I'm Vaishali Kohli and you're watching NewsX. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has virtually addressed the 47th ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. He started by congratulating East Timor on its formal induction as the bloc's 11th member. Furthermore, he emphasized that ASEAN represents global growth and shared India's commitment to the organization's principles of inclusivity. Highlighting the significance of ASEAN in India's Act East policy, he made it clear that India stands for ASEAN partners. And now I have my guests with me. Ambassador Veena Sikri, former diplomat, is joining me. Professor Rohan Gunaratna, international affairs expert from Thailand, is joining me. And Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, Mitali Nikore, economist, is joining me. I want to go across to Ambassador Veena Sikri, former diplomat, to begin with. Ambassador Sikri, your opening comments, please.
Yeah, I think Prime Minister's address was very succinct and very pointed. He really, highlighted the importance of ASEAN centrality and the importance of the India-ASEAN relationship in making this an Asian century. And this is the absolutely the core of his speech, because he was actually telling ASEAN that India and ASEAN must work together more and more to make this Asian century successful. And he fully accepted the central vision of ASEAN, where they want their goals to be achieved by 1945 and this by 2045, and this coincides very well with India's own Viksit Bharat goals for 2047. And I think that between the ASEAN's own goals for their development and India's Viksit Bharat goals, I think there is a great synergy, there's a great coming together, and Prime Minister Modi indicated his readiness and his preparedness and his determination to make this India-ASEAN cooperation ever more successful, ever more meaningful, and to make sure that we can work together to make this the India-ASEAN century. I think it was a very important statement for India's objectives with ASEAN in the coming years. We know that there are a number of important projects between India and ASEAN. We know that they are trying to look at the India-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, renegotiate, look at it, make it more comprehensive, make it more important, because right now there's a lot of goods coming in wrongly under this FTA. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done between India and ASEAN, but I think Prime Minister signaling that we are ready to do this and we're determined to do this because we want the India-ASEAN togetherness to make this an Asian century is a very important indicator from our Prime Minister's side, and I'm very glad that he focused on this point. He was addressing the summit virtually because of his commitments in India. Our External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, is there on the spot. There's going to be the India-ASEAN 22nd summit meeting between India and ASEAN that's going to take place there, and going to be with Dr. Jaishankar. We know that this is also for Japan, the 28th Japan-ASEAN summit, but for America, it's the 13th US-ASEAN summit. So we see that the India-ASEAN relationship has developed over the last 2 decades and more, and it is growing, and there's a determination on both sides, and there is a coordinating country for India among the ASEAN countries. Our Prime Minister mentioned that. All that, it's a very determined bilateral, meaningful cooperation between India and ASEAN, recognizing at all times the centrality of ASEAN and the importance of this for the Indo-Pacific, for maritime security, for working together on the Indo-Pacific, bringing this together. I think this renewed importance, renewed discussion of the India-Pacific region, the Indo-Pacific region, is a very important aspect of the discussions taking place at ASEAN, and of our Prime Minister's mention of that, because this is an important time to come back to the significance of the India-Pacific and the centrality of ASEAN, even in that, in achieving our maritime security goals, our shared maritime security goals for the Indo-Pacific.
All right, now I want to go across to Professor Rohan Gunaratna, international affairs expert. Now, Professor, I want to ask you, now there was a lot of discussion around the fact that PM Modi has not attended the ASEAN Summit in person and decided to attend it virtually. And this, of course, there was a lot of chatter on the fact that this, of course, signals cautious diplomacy. Your comments on this?
Prime Minister Modi, instead of the Prime Minister, we have Foreign Minister Jayashankar, who is a brilliant man. I don't think there is anyone of that level or caliber in most countries. So I don't think that Prime Minister Modi's absence is a big issue. But you are correct. There has been a lot of debate and discussion. Many are saying that Netanyahu did not attend the peace summit in Egypt because of the challenges he had with some of the leaders that came from the Muslim world to Egypt. Similarly, we are hearing that because of Modi's issues with Trump, he did not attend. Whatever it may be, I don't think that people should fuss about it. People should any more debate about it, because India has one of the best minds, that is Jayashankar as foreign minister, and I believe that he will take care of India's interests.
All right, now I want to go across to Mitali Nikore, who's an economist. Now I want to ask you, Mitali, how does the ASEAN India Year of Maritime Cooperation in 2026 align with India's maritime ambitions and regional partnerships?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vaishali, for having me on the show. And, it's very interesting that this entire conversation is happening at the same time as the India Maritime Week is taking place in Mumbai as we speak. And in fact, I would say that it's a very, very critical juncture in the entire development of the maritime industry, because India has a very clear maritime vision 2030, which was actually launched, a few years ago. And all of our investments, when we look at ports, when we look at, the logistics sector, which is being strengthened, and the national logistics policy, it's all in the direction of sort of making our entire maritime and nautical sciences extremely strong. I myself visited around 25 ports this year for a study that my firm, that is Nikor Associates, was leading on bringing more women into the maritime industry and into skilling women for taking up more jobs in the maritime field. And we have actually found that this sector is growing leaps and bounds. We now have India's first woman sea pilot also, who's operating here in Kolkata at a port. So at the end of the day, the sector is growing, it's becoming more inclusive, and it's definitely critical for India to work with the ASEAN region, particularly in the, with the changing global supply chains, to bring more and more investment into the maritime industry. India also has a potential to grow in the maintenance, repair, and operations of and also in shipbuilding. These are all very critical elements of the maritime sector that India is focusing on, and the partnership with ASEAN is critical to make these aims and this vision come to reality.
All right, I'd like to go across to Ambassador Veena Sikri, who is a former diplomat. Now, Ms. Sikri, I want to ask you now, do you think there'll be any takeaways for India if Trump meets Xi Jinping?
Always maintained that President Trump has actually all these weeks and months been attaching the highest importance to doing what he describes as a big, beautiful deal with China. So this is the culmination of his efforts of the last, from the time he was sworn in practically, to this meeting with President Xi Jinping on the 30th of October. So everybody is watching to see that will this big, beautiful deal materialize, or will it result only in President Trump imposing this 100% extra tariff on China from the 1st of November, as he has said. We have heard that the meetings going on in Kuala Lumpur itself between the very senior officials and the Treasury Secretary and others of the US government and their Chinese counterparts. President Trump has spoken about some progress, but I'm not so sure if this deal is going to come out in the exact way that President Trump wants. In fact, I have maintained that it is President Trump's abiding and keen interest in this deal that has made him throw all his other partners, whether in Europe or in Asia or in other countries, under the bus, as it were, and all the time saying that this is going to be the most important deal for him. Let us see. I think it's not yet clear that it's going to be the one, especially after China announced these new rules for exports of rare earths, and they're even putting restrictions. For example, they've told the government of Pakistan that you cannot use Chinese machinery and technology for extracting the rare earths that you want to send to America. So, there are all these kinds of new rules and regulations that are coming in, which is creating a lot of uncertainty and difficulties for everybody who is wanting to work on this deal, and particularly the deal between America and China that is the highest priority at the moment. But we just have another 3 days to wait. It's not looking that way right now that it will come out exactly as the way that President Trump wants it to, but we never know. There are another 3 days, there could be a lot of negotiations, a lot of give and take, and I think that after this meeting is over, the deal, whether it takes place or not, I think a lot of issues will settle down in President Trump's own interactions, visions with the rest of the world, and perhaps we'll have a lot of issues coming to a more stable conclusion.
All right, I want to now go across to Gautam Mukherjee, who's a senior journalist and is joining me. Now, Mr. Mukherjee, as a journalist, I want your opinion on this. Now, there was a lot of conversation we were discussing earlier in the debate that PM Modi's absence in person has been a huge conversation online, and it signals cautious diplomacy. What would you like to say on that?
Well, there are two aspects. One is the existing agreement with ASEAN, even as the Prime Minister welcomed Timor as the 11th member of ASEAN into the fold, is that it is tilted in favor of Chinese exports, and very little has been done in that particular agreement to protect Indian exports. So it puts us at a disadvantage. I agree with Mithali that as we expand our maritime presence in shipbuilding, in ports, in ship repair, etc., and our presence in the Indian Ocean and in the Asia Pacific, Southeast Asia, it is important to have a better and better relationship. But a lot of the area is unstable. You've got Thailand just in this agreement, this meeting, also signing with Cambodia after yet another spat on their border. Trump is principally there to talk to Xi and hopefully, as the ambassador pointed out, arrive at some kind of agreement that is suitable for both sides. He's also going to Japan, South Korea, and is open to the idea of meeting North Korea, Kim. So it's quite a package of agreements and meetings for Trump. For India, we've got domestic issues which are pressing, and the embarrassment of meeting Trump before our interim trade agreement is signed is to be avoided, and Trump and Modi quite wisely has done so. As far as diplomacy goes, our external affairs minister will more than take care of it, and so that is fine. ASEAN is important, but we are not a member, and it isn't crucial in terms of trade. It is important increasingly in terms of maritime agreements and protocols. Vaishali.
All right, I want to go across to Professor Rohan Gunaratna, International Affairs expert. Now, Professor, I want to ask you now, a few important topics that are being touched upon are US tariffs and access to rare earth minerals, which are essential, of course, to high-tech manufacturing and whose production is dominated by China. What would you like to say on this?
What we are seeing, Vaishali, is that President Trump is moving in a certain direction where he is less inclined geopolitically, but he's basically a businessman. He wants to do deals. So he wants to work even with the Chinese. So we are seeing a very significant shift in his thinking. And I personally believe that Trump has a way of challenging governments, countries, leaders, but eventually he will make an assessment and he will also follow the assessments of his colleagues, the same way with regard to Brazil, what he did. So what's going to take place in the coming weeks and coming months is Trump is doing his best to work out an agreement with China, and it is very likely that the initial tariffs that he has discussed and proposed may even change in the coming months and coming years. With regard to the rare earth metals, certainly there will be a greater discussion between the Chinese and the Americans, and these decisions that they have until now, the protocols and the rules they have will also change.
All right. Now, I want to go across to Mitali Nikore, who's an economist. Now, Mitali, among other things that the PM has discussed, of course, he has spoken about maritime cooperation and cyber security. I'd like your comments on that.
Thank you so much, Vaishali. So I think the first thing to understand is why is it so important to speak about ASEAN even today? And that is because if you look at the history of the ASEAN bloc, these 11 countries working together, these Asian tigers, if you will, working together, is very critical for the entire global economy because they represent about 8 to 10% of the global GDP. But they also, actually encompass almost a fifth of the global growth that has happened in the last 10 years. And that's very significant. So therefore, it's very important that these growing markets are critically embedded in Indian supply chains. That's the first. The second aspect is that, there's a lot of innovation and research that's actually taking place in multiple ASEAN economies. If you look at Singapore, of course, Singapore is the leader when it comes to research and innovation in the entire tech space. And even when it comes to cybersecurity in that sense, Singapore is amongst the most advanced when it comes to advanced cybersecurity tools. Also, given that it's an Asian country, it becomes easier for India to cooperate with Singapore, to cooperate with Indonesia, to cooperate with Thailand. And all of these countries are also very central to the tourism industry, very central to, just the import and export and value chain businesses that are coming up. I myself am working in Indonesia, and I can tell you that the culture is so similar to India in many ways. And there's a lot of cultural exchange also that can take place. So therefore, in this entire summit, it becomes very important to highlight that ASEAN, which has become very integrated with Chinese supply chains, can still look at India as a viable trading partner, as a viable, sort of partner in the entire supply chain narrative, and bring in co-manufacturing, bring in energy cooperation, bring in cybersecurity cooperation, and bring in research and innovation and create products together for the global market. And I think that is exactly what the Prime Minister was trying to highlight.
All right, I want to go across to Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist. Now, Mr. Mukherjee, I want to ask you, how does PM Modi's mention of Viksit Bharat 2047 alongside ASEAN Community Vision 2045 reflect India's ambitions for its economic growth and global influences?
I think it is a reminder that India will shortly be number 3 in the world economies and keep on growing as number 3, chasing the overall GDP of China and America. The possibilities are absolutely enormous. We have the largest domestic market in the world. We have 700 million people in the middle class. We have an enormous consumption story. 10% indeed, but it's fragmented into so many countries. If they want to, put all their eggs in the Chinese basket, it is one thing, but China's now growing at 4%. We are growing at nearly 7%, and with the various FTAs, we are now on the brink of signing, in addition to the British one. We are probably going to add another percentage point at least. Infrastructure is developing fast. What is interesting in this summit, amongst other things, is there might be a pull aside between Trump and Lula of Brazil. Now, Brazil is also suffering from a 50% US tariff and has recently proposed a barter deal with Indian defense. They'll send us transport planes, we'll send them fighters and helicopters. It is possible that all these tariffs that have been unfairly imposed on India and Brazil will come down, particularly after the Ukraine war comes to an end, and there are indications that that might happen in the not too distant future. It's the people are talking behind the scenes, and there are indications that there might be a compromise arrived at soon. So amongst all of this, India is a very prominent star for the future. And ASEAN, even though it is wedded to China, may well be thinking of getting
Mr.
another
Mukherjee,
string
I'll
to
have
its
to
bow.
interrupt you because there's breaking news coming in, but I'll come back to all my guests. Now, US President Donald Trump has said that he will resolve the Afghan-Pakistan crisis very quickly on the sidelines of the ASEAN Summit. Trump said, and I quote, "I heard that Pakistan and Afghanistan have started up, but I'll get that solved really quickly." His comments come as peace talks between the warring neighbors entered a second day. Now, US President Donald Trump has said that he is confident of hashing out a deal with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Trump told reporters in Kuala Lumpur, and I quote, "I think we're going to have a deal with China." This comes as top economic officials from both countries reached a preliminary consensus in trade talks that concluded today. I'd like to go across to my guest, Ambassador Veena Sikri, former diplomat. Ms. Sikri, what are your comments on Trump's China statement?
Well, I think, as I said, this has been his dream that he's had for the many months now of having this big, beautiful deal with China. My question on that is, what does he envisage with China? Because we know that all previous American presidents, bipartisan, Democrat or Republican, have looked upon China as a rival, as a strategic problem, as something that they have to, counter by. And they've always looked at India as one of the important countries that is going to help them in this. Now, is it that President Trump is now looking at this concept of the G2, of just, USA and China? This G2 concept is something that was proposed by some economists but taken up by people like President Barack Obama and the Democrats and proposed to the Chinese. I'm a little doubtful whether China would accept that, but certainly this G2 idea to accommodate China instead of looking upon them as a strategic rival, this I don't think it's going to work because China has already shown that. That's one point. So this is one aspect of President Trump's statement that will be watched very carefully as to what kind of deal that he's working out with China. Is it going to be so accommodative that it's going to be, because we know that we in India, we attach the highest importance to our strategic autonomy and we want a multipolar world. And I must tell you that ASEAN too wants a multipolar world. I do not think at all that ASEAN is wedded to their relationship with China. In fact, ASEAN is more apprehensive about the kind of pressure China puts on them, and they find it very difficult to resist. We know that even the code of conduct for the South China Sea, they've been negotiated between ASEAN and China for a long time, but China gives no quarter at all to the insistence of so many ASEAN countries about the territorial disputes, the maritime disputes that they have with China in the South China Sea. So it's not that ASEAN is at all times wanting to do what China says, but they want definitely to have this code of conduct on the South China Sea concluded on the maritime issues between China and ASEAN. And they do know that as far as exports and imports are concerned, they are beholden to China for a lot. But that is why ASEAN also looks to India. So that is why what our Prime Minister said about the importance of the Indian-ASEAN relationship, the mutual benefit that it has for India and ASEAN, and how India and ASEAN together carry a great message for the world in terms of continuing multipolarity, in terms of strategic autonomy, and working with all parts of the world. I mean, India has its own relationship with China. India has its own relationship with the USA, with the European Union, with UK and others. And we work on that. Our trade deal with the UK is a very significant one. Our trade deal with Australia, with UAE, they carry importance of their own. But it maintains our focus on multipolarity, and that is what we would like to see. So, President Trump going on now, say, like talking about Pakistan and Afghanistan, we've seen Pakistan making the exact opposite statements, saying that if Afghanistan doesn't do a peace deal immediately, I think they're in Turkey at the moment or somewhere like that, then, Pakistan is going to have an all-out war with Afghanistan. So it's all kinds of statements coming from everywhere, and we do know that Pakistan and Afghanistan have a huge number of differences because of the terrorist groups. Pakistan is supporting the terrorist groups, which the Taliban government in Afghanistan does not accept, and so on. So this is all terrorism, and we in India and all the countries of ASEAN and many countries of South Asia, we want to work against terrorism. We want an important counter-terrorism agreement. We want all countries of the world to accept and recognize that terrorism is the biggest threat to humanity, and terrorism is what destroys peace. And today, even in the peace deal between Israel and the people of Palestine, it is the need to end the activities of a terrorist group like Hamas that is all important. Unless you have a complete and non-recurring end without them being able to come back to the activities of Hamas as a terrorist organization, you cannot work towards the two-state solution. So this is what it is, that this is the terrorism as a threat to peace, and this is what India has been talking about to all countries and getting a lot of positive and strong response. And with ASEAN, this is the same. We support ASEAN on the need for a code of conduct on South China Sea. We support ASEAN fully on the importance of maritime security in the Indo-Pacific. We're working very closely with Quad on that. We hope that once this US-China deal is out of the way, we can come back to talking about maritime security and reactivate Quad. But in the meanwhile, we are talking to Japan about maritime security. We're talking to Australia about maritime security. So Quad or no Quad, maritime security and the importance of this in the Indo-Pacific is being discussed by India directly with countries like Japan and Australia, who are both with India members of the Quad. So it shows that while India is watching what is happening and being very sensitive on what is happening, we are maintaining our own focus on strategic autonomy and multipolarity, and I think that is what we are going to continue to work towards. And Dr. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister, during his meetings in Kuala Lumpur, he's already had some, I think, with the Foreign Minister of South Korea, and he's going to have many more. All these issues will come up.
Right, Ms. Secretary. And now, well, on the sidelines of the ASEAN Summit, US President Trump said he could work out some deals during his meeting with Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Trump said that he thinks that the US should be able to, and I quote, make some pretty good deals for both countries. This comes as Trump has increased tariffs on imports of most Brazilian goods to 50% from 10% in early August. All right, so I have Professor Rohan Gunaratna, International Affairs expert, with me. Professor Gunaratna, what are your comments on Trump wanting better deals for both countries when it comes to Brazil?
Brazil is a very important country for the United States today more than ever before, because the South and Central America, Trump has difficulties with Venezuela at this point, and he wants to make sure that the other countries in South and Central America has a good relationship with the US. Trump also has difficulties with Canada. So in the Americas, he wants to make sure that he restores and strengthens his relationship with the other states in the Americas. That is why he was very keen to meet with Lula da Silva and to ensure that the existing disputes are resolved. That is, on the tariffs, there will certainly be a better deal, but Trump is keen also to expand US relations with Brazil. So I believe that this visit to Kuala Lumpur on the part of the US leader is going to make many changes, not only the US ASEAN relationship, but also Trump will travel further to other countries in Northeast Asia, where he will even discuss the possibilities of resuming his role as a mediator for North Korea. Trump is moving forward both as a businessman and as a peacemaker, as a deal maker. So he's willing to break the norm. He's willing to do things that are quite unconventional in terms of improving America's economy, but also his reputation as a man who can end wars.
All right, and with that, I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me on the broadcast today. And with that, we're slipping into a short commercial break. There's a lot more on the other side. Stay tuned.
अगर आप बनना चाहते हैं